Good morning from Arizona, Shelton Church of the Nazarene. I am in the Sunshine State, I guess, the state where it doesn't rain very much, where I have to wear these glasses because we had a very surprising, unexpected family tragedy befall us recently. My mother passed just about a week and a half ago, and it's been kind of a roller coaster of emotions, of time with family. It's been, as I call it, a terrible honor to be here. I'm not going to go into too much of all of the story of what happened in the last week my mother was alive, but I'll just give a really brief thank you for the prayers, because all of her sons were able to make it just in time. I'll probably put a link in the video description to the actual memorial service if you're interested in watching it, and that just happened this past weekend. But this is the first Sunday of the month, and we're celebrating communion in cars in the church facility parking lot. But today I wanted to give you kind of a special on-location sermon, because I'm at a pretty great location. I'll tell you about that in a second. Today I want to focus on some things that are significant to focus on, things that I feel like maybe we oftentimes lose sight of. These past 10, 11 months have been a lot, and this coming week we're going to be in it. Our country has been so polarized. COVID, mask wearing, Black Lives Matter, you name it, and people have strong opinions on it, and they dislike those that disagree. And as the church, we're called to be unified, but it's hard to be unified and united when there's a dozen options for us to choose which side we fall on. But it's probably pretty important to remember something that Jesus said, particularly on a communion Sunday. He said, "Do this in remembrance of me," or he said, "Do this whenever you gather together to remember me." To honor this gift of salvation, this foundational, doctrinal, theological belief that we have as Christians. And it's important to remember, because right now it seems like we think we should do just about any other thing to honor Jesus. It seems to me that right now we're equating our own personal opinions on things with something far more important, like communion. A lot of times we gloss over the most significant things, like participating in a means of grace, in this actual receiving of God's love through taking bread and juice that we consecrate and we commemorate and we participate in, this significant moment where we commune with the Almighty. Sometimes we look over that stuff, we make molehills out of mountains, but then we take the actual molehills in life and we create mountains out of them in the name of what we think Jesus would want us to do. And all too often, we repeatedly continue to miss the mark. And it's just a little frustrating as a pastor, if I can be honest. I mean, it's been hard enough to deal with COVID, to have a nurse that is coming home worried about bringing home this virus to our children. It's hard enough to try to come up with all these unique and creative ways to pastor, because I could be considered an exposure risk, and I don't want to get people sick in the first place. It's difficult enough to pastor in an election. This is the second time I've had to be a pastor during a presidential election. My first year as a lead pastor was the fateful Trump-Hillary election. And without exception, everyone just assumed I was voting the same way they were. I had people saying, "Man, that guy has such a mouth on him. He doesn't know how to stop talking." And then I had just as many people say, "Wow, she needs to go to jail, doesn't she? What a terrible person." And without exception, folks just kind of made these assumptions that this is just the way you see the world. This is how it's supposed to be. But it's getting harder and harder to just keep my mouth shut, to have a filter, to be as pastoral as possible, when time and time again I see folks that claim to have faith in Jesus, folks that claim to be part of the church, make issues that are not significant into the end-all, be-all. Things like whether or not masks should be the norm. Things like whether or not we need to care more about black lives or blue lives. Whether we need to be worried about this new conspiracy with QAnon. Whether we're supposed to vote Trump or Biden. Whether the list goes on and on and on. And it's just exhausting. And honestly, again, to be candid and genuine with you, my mom helped me have a filter, and I get these tendencies to be blunt from my father. And my mom would regularly say, "Josiah, did you want to say it like that? Did you want to talk like that?" And regularly I had to think about my response. But in this moment, in this week leading up to what everyone is talking about as the presidential election of our lifetime. Of course, they're not going to skip one and say, "Oh, guys, this one we could sleep on it. We're not even going to report on it. These candidates are boring." It's just, there's nothing but hype in 2020. Everything is so hyped up. There are legitimate issues that are happening, but then there's hype both ways on downplaying or overselling whatever the issue is. Pick your issue. But we're going to get lost in the weeds if we continue to place all of our ambitions, all of our hopes, all of our dreams, all of our lives, in whether it's going to be good or bad, in the hands of fill in the blank. This week it's who we think should be president. Now this may sound alarming to some of you, but guess what? God is still God, even if I'll say both for the sake of exercise, because I think some of us need to say the other one, but I'll say both, and you can say it with me. God is still God, even if Trump, even if Trump, I'm gonna get in trouble now, I forgot our president's name. God is still God, even if Trump gets reelected. And God is still God, even if, what's the other one's name? Biden. Even if Biden gets elected. Jesus is still the Son of God, no matter who is the President of the United States. And Jesus died on the cross and offered forgiveness for sins and asks us to commemorate this gift regardless of who's president. Like, that's just an afterthought. Jesus never once said, "Please do this in remembrance of me," as long as you have the right political affiliation. As long as you stand for the right policies and procedures, as long as you side with the right political team, because I'm bringing about my will through one political party and not the other. I'm sorry, folks. That's just not. It's not even a little bit how Jesus operates. Jesus regularly would call people to another way. Sometimes as Wesleyans we call it a third way, and that third way is just different. It's not what you will hear. It's not a regular thing. And John Wesley himself actually took it a step further. During times like this, I'm gonna have to pull off my sunglasses because I can't see my cell phone. But this third way, this alternative lifestyle, doesn't pick sides. It doesn't say that one side is good and the other side is evil when it comes to human-made labels and constructs. Now, sure, I'm sure some of you are politically aligned with one party over the other, and that's fine, but your political affiliation is not a salvation level concern. And I think it's important for us to remember that, especially right now, especially this week, especially when instead, as the church, as the people of God, we are called to remember what the Son of God did. We only do this once a month, and I'll be honest, this may be a little blunt, but we haven't had a whole lot of people turn out on some months. And I get it, maybe people don't want to get served communion in a car, but But it seems like there's a lot more people concerned about a campaign than they are about communion. And that genuinely doesn't sit well with me. I was looking up the quote from John Wesley and I couldn't find it. But John Wesley once just said something as a very passing aside, making it very clear that this is not the most important thing. John Wesley said, on election day, go and vote your conscience. Don't begrudge people that don't vote the same way as you do. Don't begrudge the candidate you didn't vote for, and pray for those people. And then John Wesley didn't talk much more about it, because his focus was on who Jesus is and who Jesus called us to be. See, if we're not careful, church, we can get so caught up and so distracted in things that are just honestly a little less important. And I get it. We really care about money. We really care about taxes. We really care about civil liberties. We really care about our rights. We're sometimes, as a default, a little self-centered, and we don't want people to take our stuff away. And I get that. I'm an American too. I don't want people to tell me what to do all the time. I don't want them to take my stuff away. But freedom doesn't really come from a document written a couple hundred years ago. Neither does liberty. Neither does salvation or real life. It comes from this gift that is offered to us, the sacrificial gift of the Son of God. And he told us repeatedly to remember that gift, to celebrate it, to participate in it. And it's not some sort of metric that I want you to start counting, but I do want you to think about it today. How much have you been focusing on the wrong C word? How much have you been focusing on a campaign, on debates, on candidates, as opposed to communion, receiving a means of grace, communing with the Almighty? Because that might be a little bit telling. That might be significant for us. See, right now, hopefully I haven't spoiled it with moving around too much. I've intentionally been focusing on what's behind me because it's this perfect picture of what we could be doing as the church right now in America. It's really easy to focus. It's really easy to focus on this little small picture of what's happening in our world, to really get hung up on this potentially being a metaphor for our country, that this is just, we're in it. This is our lives, we're concerned about it, but if we get so hyper-focused, we can miss out on the gloriousness of God's gift, of His creation, of what salvation really affords us, because we're so hyper-focused on something that's less significant. Now, if you don't know already, this is the Grand Canyon. It's pretty sweet. I grew up about 2 hours south from here, and we thought we'd bring the grandkids up here. But I thought, what better sermon illustration for the week leading up to the election. An election that, if you watch enough TV, would be the biggest, most important thing ever happened in history. That's what they'll tell you. It's the most important thing that has ever happened, and in your life will either be awesome or awful, depending on whether or not your candidate wins. But if you would allow me to, I would challenge that, just like I've challenged numerous other things that have happened in 2020. To be honest, I'm tired of 2020, but just par for the course. All this election hype is about is some sort of self-serving agenda that someone has convinced you is really important, that you need to have, otherwise your life is going to be ruined. It's fear tactics, it's fear-based. At the end of the day, God is still God. Jesus still is the Son of God who offers us salvation and the forgiveness of sins, and He still calls the church to be the church. That God's will is that the church would live out the mission given, and that it doesn't really matter which political party is in power, that there will be presidents that come and go, that just like other earthly kingdoms, rulers will come and go, and so will countries, and borders will change, and history will march on. But what is really important is that the people of God continue to seek after God's heart, to do the things God has called them to do, to be the people God has called them to be the church. It's probably not a common thing that you'll hear often, but I challenge you to find somewhere in the Bible where it says you have to vote one way or another. Genuinely. All we're called to do is follow the teachings of Jesus, to live out this Christian life, to be followers. And today, especially, it's so much more important than any election ever will be. Today, we celebrate this gift through a tangible means of grace, where we can participate, touch, taste, smell, and feel God's love for us. This amazing gift that we don't have to vote right to get, that we don't have to defeat some other candidate to win, that it's a freely offered gift, that it's life-changing, that it's transformative, and that it's something we can share freely with other people, even those who might vote for that other guy, even those that maybe don't think the same thing about us when it comes to masks and viruses. That maybe God loves those people that think this way about conspiracies, even though we think that way. That maybe God's love is even for those protesters on the other side of the issue who don't think the same way or look the same way or talk the same way as us. That God's love is freely offered to all who would receive. That this is this beautiful picture of how deep and how wide and how vast the love of God truly is. But if we're not careful, we'll get lost in the weeds, and our focus will be on things that I guess they're still kind of important, but they don't compare. So this Sunday, this first Sunday of November, the Sunday before an election, I challenge you to take inventory. What has been getting your attention? I challenge you to even take time and talk to God about, hey, if my candidate doesn't win, it's okay, I know you're in control. Despite what every commercial has said leading up to this campaign. Man, I challenge you to take a step further. Gosh, I'm honestly sick of it, folks. They've spent like $12 billion on this nonsense. Conservative estimates say that $10 billion would solve the world's water crisis, that everyone on the planet could get clean drinking water. Oh, it drives me crazy. See, as the church, though, we can have those discussions. We can talk about what it looks like to make an impact, to do something tangible, because that's exactly what our Creator calls us to do. To be in communion with Him, to draw closer to Him, to be in fellowship with one another, and to tell the world about what He's done. So let's focus on the big things. Let's major in the majors and minor in the minors. There's a timeless phrase, and this is how I'll end the service, the sermon, whatever this is. This is how we are called to be as the church. In essentials, and the things that matter, in salvation and communion, and in who Jesus is, we're supposed to be unified. In essentials, unity. In non-essentials, Republican or Democrat, Biden or Trump. Liberty, which simply means doesn't matter as much. You can vote for one or the other, and you'll probably still make it to heaven if you have a relationship with Jesus. And in all things, this is really important. I think our ability to do this is running out in 2020. In all things, charity. That's my challenge to you from Arizona, from the south rim of the Grand Canyon. This is what it looks like for us to be the church. This is what I feel God has continued to try to lay on my heart, and I've heard it laid on other people's hearts as well. Consider, regardless who becomes president, what it looks like for us to continue to be the church that God has called us to be. See you soon.